For the Detroit Lions to get to this point, it has been a long time coming. But now, they are literally one step away from reaping the rewards of all of their patience. Stay tuned, everybody. We're about to talk about it. We used to be a team no one respected. We used to be a team no one feared. That was then. This is now.
First victory of the year on the line. Goff's got it. Back, looks, throws, end zone. Yes! Caught!
You know who we are.
10-5, end zone, touchdown Detroit Lions!
And you know where to find us. We won't be far. We'll be on your front porch waiting for you. We are the New Era Lions. And
we are driven by Detroit.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike, and as always, we're diving in right now. But before we dive on in, I just want to say to all my loyal fans and subscribers that are coming back to the show, thank you so much for coming back. Thank you for devoting more time to my show. It really means the world to me. And to those that are tuning into my show for the very first time, again, thank you all for giving my show a shot and devoting some of your day to watch the show as well. But even more so, I hope you enjoy the show, and I also hope to gain your subscription if I've earned and deserved it. And with that being said to everybody, I just hope you're having a blessed day. I hope you're doing really well. So God bless. And let's talk about the content here. So, when we take a look at the Detroit Lions in this moment, especially for us fans, we are on the verge of realizing a dream that many of us have not even dared to believe. And it's something that for us, it's like we have thought about it, we've dreamed about it, we've fantasized about it in some extent. And it's like, listen, it's such a wonderful thing to think about, but now when you are literally this close to not believing, but realizing that it's going to happen, it's something that is just absolutely awe-inspiring. It's just, again, fantastical. Because you have to think about this. We've talked about it all this week, but the Lions are in the NFC Championship game. That's something that the Lions have only done twice in the entire Super Bowl era, back in 1991 and now currently in 2023. I know it's 2024, I'm talking about the season. But when you think about it, how the Lions have gotten to this point, it is just absolutely just crazy to think about. So I decided to say, you know what, we should take a look back at how this whole thing got started. Because we've had to trust, us Lions fans and the players, everybody a part of that organization had to trust a process. They had to trust that, you know what, this was going to work. And you know what? That process is kind of like how if you go to a philosophy class, they will all say the same thing, that all journeys start with a single step, or that, you know what, on a journey, the next step is always the most difficult. It's like, listen, you've got to keep moving. You have to keep trusting the process. And I'm going to say this right now. While there were a lot of Lions fans that trusted the process, I can guarantee you this, when we first started this whole thing, I don't think anybody thought we were going to be where we were at right now, literally 3 years later. So I figured, you know what, let's kind of look back and see how we got to where we got. So, from what I can understand, at least from my notes, there's about 5 steps that the Lions had to go through, and what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to compartmentalize and compact those steps, but obviously it was a lot more than just 5 steps. I'm just trying to do it for the sake of the video. But when we take a look at step 1, the first step, in my opinion, and probably the biggest step, is that Sheila had to take over as the owner, because we have to think about something here. The ownership of the Lions had been mostly through William Clay Ford, rest in peace, since the 1960s, all the way up until, the early 2000s. And then his wife took over, Martha. So it's like, listen, when Sheila finally took over, Sheila had to do something completely different than what her parents had done. And that's exactly what Sheila did. Sheila presented herself as a change of pace to her parents' terms of ownership because, as we know, because I've talked on this channel and on my previous channel, DLF, about how Sheila was a very different kind of individual than her parents, especially in terms of how she went about the approach of hiring and firing individuals, about how she went about running the organization, how she was involved in the organization. A lot of things were different about Sheila. But when you think about it just in terms of the things that I was talking about, in terms of hiring and firing personnel, Sheila was not going to wait to pull the plug on people. She was not going to wait long. If she felt that somebody had to go, she was going to fire them. And when it came to the terms of hiring people, she would take advice from people, she would listen to people, but she was never going to be like, okay, I want this person because this is what seems to be the most popular thing at the time. No, I'm going to be like, okay, I'm going to take all evidence I can, I'm going to take all information that I can, so that way I'm informed, but I'm not going to be pushing one thing in particular. So there's that part. And again, how Sheila is in terms of the organization. What is she? She is very, very competitive. Sheila is a very competitive individual. And partly that is because, I hate to say it, but it is because of her gender. And I'm not saying that because of that. I'm saying because of how this world has been in certain areas. Because if you think about it, because she was a female, she wasn't able to do the things that she wanted to do as soon as she was able to. Because again, I've talked about this in the past. As soon as she became old enough to where she could start working, she could start doing things, the first thing she said she wanted to do is she wanted to work in the NFL. Well, back in those days, when Pete Rozelle was the commissioner, she went to him because her father was friends with him, and he couldn't think of anything that she could do in the NFL. Well, now there are tons of females that are working in the NFL. Refs, assistant coaches, trainers, so on and so forth. So part of that was from there. She's very competitive because of the fact that she always wanted to be a part of the NFL, but she had to wait quite a while. But then you also have to think about it also because of her upbringing. She comes from the Ford family. If you're going to be a multi-billionaire family, or you're going to be a part of that, naturally you're going to be competitive to some degree. But you have to take a look at her upbringing from her childhood. Because again, I've talked about how Sheila, when she was coming up, when she was growing up, she was a very competitive individual when she was going to high school and college. She was a Michigan High School State Championship here in Michigan. She was also the first female class that was admitted, I think, to one of the Ivy schools. I think it was Yale. She was the first female class that was admitted and graduated from the school. If I also recall correctly, as part of that Ivy school, she was on the women's tennis team. So again, she's a very competitive, very accomplished individual in her own right. And then once she got out of college and she started, raising a family, she also, would teach soccer, would be a coach to soccer kids, pick them up from practice, teach and coach and all that stuff. So again, Sheila's a very accomplished individual, but she's very competitive. And again, her whole life has been the Lions. Again, to kind of tie this all up into a nice little bow here, ever since she was little, she would go to games at Tiger Stadium with her father. She would go to training camps in West Bloomfield with her father. So it's like her whole life has been around the Detroit Lions. So for her, taking her upbringing, her competitive nature, and now tying that into a program that she's always wanted to be a part of, one that has struggled, yeah, you can see how not hiring her, she wasn't hired, she was given the reins of ownership from her mother. That right there, you can see how she's a very, very different breed of individual than both her mother and her father used to be. So that was step number one. Step number two. This is another big one. They're all big, but this is another big one. Step number two, regime change. November 28th, 2020. Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn are fired. Now, I'm going to say this. We can step back and we can say 3 years removed that how immensely crucial this regime change was for the Detroit Lions. Because when you go back to that period, we were not doing anything as far as the Detroit Lions. All we were doing was further sinking into mediocrity and just absolutely just looking terrible. Because Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia could not figure out how to build a team and make it actually work. So Sheila came in, took over as the owner, and she said, I'm going to give Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn one more year. At first, things kind of started out ho-hum. We were 3-3, but then from there, everything just went downhill. And by the time we got to Thanksgiving and we got blown out by the Houston Texans on Thanksgiving, 2 days later, Quinn and Patricia were fired, which then started the whole process of finding the new head coach and the new GM. Now, this goes back to what I just said in step one. Sheila did not wait until the end of the season to fire Quinn and Patricia, which was normally a trademark of the Ford ownership. They would stick with the process until the entirety of the season being done, and then in the offseason, they would typically fire whoever they were going to fire. Sheila said, no, screw that. We're not doing that. We are taking care of it right now so we can get an early jump start on who we want to fill in as the new head coach and GM, which was both bold and unprecedented for a Ford owner. So, we get news at the end of November that they're going to be fired. They're being moved on. This then moves into the change, because then we get the hiring news of Brad Holmes on January 14th, 2021, and then 6 days later, or 7 days later, whichever you want to call it, January 21st, we then get the news that Dan Campbell is hired as the head coach. So Brad Holmes was hired first as GM, then Dan Campbell was hired 6 or 7 days later as the head coach. Now, if you think about it, from the end of November to about the end of January, because that's right around where all that was, that whole process took about 3 months. So she took 3 whole months to find new management for the team. She took her time. She made sure to listen to advice. She made sure to go through an extensive process to say, listen, we want to know who are the best candidates to fill in for this job. We're not going to rush the process. We're not going to try and find somebody to just throw in real quick. We're going to take our time to find who best exemplifies, who best fits what it means to be a Detroit Lion and to be a leader of the Detroit Lions team and community. So again, she went straight to work after firing Quinn and Patricia, but then took a very long, arduous process to make sure she found the right guys to build a winning program. And again, I'm just going to say this right now. Finding Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell, those guys are finding cherries on top, because those are two guys with very similar visions about how they want to build a team and what they're looking for in terms of talent. So for me, it's like, listen, not only did Sheila do her job right by taking the long time to figure it out, she then found 2 guys that were going to put in all the necessary work to bring that vision, to bring that job that Sheila wanted done to reality. So again, that was step number 2, the regime change. Now, step number 3. This is where things kind of get a little dark for Lions fans. Tear down. Step number 3 is tear down. Because after the hiring of Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell, the Lions began the very, very painful task of trying to reboot the team. And that was pretty much because of how badly it was mishandled by Quinn and Patricia. And what was the biggest move in that? January 31st, 2021, Matthew Stafford and Jared Goff trade time. Because that trade is in essence what starts the whole Lions turnaround. That's how the Lions got their new franchise quarterback and Jared Goff, along with substantial draft compensation, and Matthew Stafford goes to a team that he feels that he can win right now with. So, that right there, that move started the whole thing, because as I've said in the past, and a lot of people have agreed with me, there was no way that the Lions were ever going to truly rebuild with Stafford around. It just wasn't going to happen. It was constantly being called a retooling. It wasn't called a rebuild, it was retooling. Well, at this point, it wasn't a retool, it wasn't a rebuild, it was a teardown. We had to cut out everything and start right from the bare bottom again, because we had nothing. And it's like, listen, you know what? Getting all the draft picks, that was nice. Getting Jared Goff, for me at least at the time, that was nice. For a lot of people, they didn't consider it nice. But despite all of that, despite that haul, we had to tighten the belts really hard. Because again, Quinn and Patricia had screwed up the roster badly, handing out a ton of bad contracts, tons of dead cap. And it was like, listen, we just had to literally just bite it. We just had to grin our teeth and bear it, because there was just not a lot of money around. And we couldn't sign players that we wanted to sign. And we had to watch a lot of people that we possibly wanted to keep go away, such as Marvin Jones, Matt Prater. Those were 2 huge losses that we could have kept around in 2021 that could have helped us out. But we lost a lot of them. We lost those 2 guys and a lot of other players. Some of them that were rather fortuitously, such like Kenny Galladay, who wanted a big contract, then went to New York, couldn't do anything with it. So good move on Brad Holmes' part not to get suckered into that one. But then we also saw Brad Holmes sign a player like Romeo Okwara to a huge 3-year deal, and pretty much has not done virtually anything to earn it. He's been replaced by Aiden Hutchinson and James Houston. So it's like, you know what? You kind of have to look at the situation and just be like, hey, you know what? You had to keep somebody. Romeo Okwara looked like the best shot at the time, and it was what it was. But that was the painful part for the Lions, is that we had to go through all that because there wasn't much to replenish because of all of the money that was being lost. So every contract that the Lions had in the 2021 offseason before we started the season, we were virtually signing everybody to 1-year deals. The only 2 players that we didn't sign to 1-year deals were Jamal Williams and Romeo Okwara. Jamal Williams got a 2-year contract. Romeo got a 3-year contract. Now, I will say this. Brad Holmes, I will give him all credit due because it wasn't just in the draft where he did his business. He found some real good players in the free agency pool on those one-year deals. Such guys like Alex Anzalone and Khalif Raymond. Those were one-year signings that Brad Holmes went out and got, and they have been absolutely instrumental to the Lions. But I will say this. A lot of those guys that we signed, we knew what we were getting. We were getting depth and role players. And a lot of those guys failed to do much of anything. Such guys like Tyrell Williams, such guys like Brashad Perryman, Tim Boyle. I mean, I can go on and on, folks, but I don't think anybody wants me to go back down that long hapless trail. Then at that point, after we're done with the free agents period, where we got virtually nothing out of it, then we get to Brad Holmes' true masterpieces, his draft ability. And that's where he pulled off his very, very first great draft haul. We get players like Penei Sewell, Aleem McNeil, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Ife Melifonwu. The list goes on and on. But despite that good draft, that was only the beginning of the process. The real true work had just begun. Because it's like, okay, we've now cleaned out the cancer. Now we're building this culture. Now we're starting the work. Now we're going to put rubber to road, and we're going to make sure this thing starts moving down the road. And let's understand something, folks. It was not a smooth process. It was not a smooth ride down the road. There were a lot of bumps in the road. Because the next step that we had was the trials and tribulations. That's step number 4. Because 2021, and I would even say the beginning of 2022, was a very, very trying time for Lions fans and for the Lions team. Because not only were the fans, the players, and the coaches losing hope, there was a lot of other people that were just throwing crap at this whole process. Because think about it for the fans. We were losing hope. We were wanting to toss out the baby with the bathwater. People were calling for Holmes to be fired, for Campbell to be fired, for the whole team to get restructured again. There were fans that were just like, listen, we're seeing the same thing that we've seen time and time and time again. We're not wanting to go through this again. Just start all over again. Then you take a look at it from Campbell's perspective. Dan Campbell was constantly under fire from the media, especially the national media, and there were some fans, especially in the beginning of 2022, that wanted him to be fired because we were starting to see on Twitter in the beginning of 2022, hashtag fire Dan Campbell. And it was just like, dude, the man hasn't even had 2 years to start this process. Did you honestly think it was going to be a great start? Hell no. You're talking about Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia's masterful mishandling of this whole situation. It's going to take time to right the ship. And then you think about it outside of Campbell and Holmes, Jared Goff. Oh my good Lord. Jared Goff handled this whole situation like with the patience of a saint because he was under constant fire and duress no matter how well he played or no matter how well he tried. If you think about it, the last 6 games of 2021 and virtually almost all the games of 2022, he played absolutely exemplary football. But many fans still wanted him gone because he just didn't fit the kind of quarterback that they were looking for or that they thought they were looking for. And they wanted to bring in a new quarterback, and they blamed him for virtually everything that was wrong with the team, even if he had nothing to do with it. They blamed him for losses, they blamed him for this, and it was just like, listen, Jared Goff, no matter what happened, never once lost his cool, never once lost his professionalism, and it was like, listen, he just was like, listen, I just got to go to work and I got to be better. I've got to do whatever I got to do to help make this team better. That's what Dan Campbell talks about with that resiliency, because it's like, listen, Jared Goff knew that the things that were going on that were falling apart weren't his fault, but it's like, listen, as a leader, he has to try and help. So it's like, listen, you've got to be mentally resilient. You got to be mentally tough. And that's exactly what all of these guys were doing. Campbell, Holmes, Goff. They were all like, listen, we knew this wasn't going to be sunshine and rainbows to start off. It was going to be an arduous task. But you know what? Eventually, I put heavy emphasis on the word, eventually, the sunshine's going to come through. And that brings us to step number 5, the step that we're currently on. Roar restored. Because when we get to about the midpoint of 2022 to the end of 2022, the Lions finally found what they needed to do to win. Because they went from 1-6 to start the year, losing a lot of games very close, to finishing the year 9-8 after going on an 8-2 tear to finish the year. The Lions then followed up 2022 with yet another strong offseason where they got another great installment of draft picks, regardless of what the national media wanted to say, getting players like Gibbs, Laporta, Branch, Campbell. Again, we followed that all up with a great free agency period, getting players also like CJ, GJ. I mean, it was just a good period of time. And then we come into the regular season in 2023. Now the Lions had their marching orders. It's like, okay, we finished 2022 strong. We had a good draft. We had a good free agency period. Now it's time to go out and contend with the big dogs. Just like freaking Brad Holmes said with Ray Agnew, our intention is to compete and contend with the big dogs. That was the marching orders. And if you think about it, the Lions have done just that. I've talked about how they've done well on the road. They've done well at home. They've done well in primetime games. They've done well against teams above 500. They've beaten the defending Super Bowl champions, the Kansas City Chiefs, in the opening game of the season. They won the division crown for the first time since 1993. They've had 2 straight playoff wins, something that has not happened since 1957. It's the 3rd time overall in the entire time of the Lions franchise. They made it to the conference championship game. Only 2nd time that's ever happened for this franchise. If you think about it, roar has been restored. The Lions are a team that everyone respects, and if you think about it, most people do not want to play us because we're a team that you have to reckon with. And if you think about it, the fans admire the team now. The fans are all in on the team. When we're breaking decibel records at Ford Field, when we're selling out tickets left and right, and tickets are costing $1,500 to go to a game, yeah, the roar has been restored. So we've now got to the end of the process, or almost to the end of the process. Now we're at the process part where we're at right now. You've got one more step. You've got this step against the 49ers that you have to take. This next hurdle, so that way you can get to that ultimate game that the Lions have never been to, the Super Bowl. That's why I said, you've trusted the process, Detroit. You've trusted the process, fans. You've trusted the process, Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell, Jared Goff, everybody else. You've trusted it. You are one step away from reaping the rewards. One little step. It's a big step, but all you've got to do is clear that threshold, win that game, and you're now going to the Super Bowl. Yeah. When you think about how the Lions have had to do everything that they've done over the last 3 years, it's absolutely an amazing sight to behold because it's like, listen, everything that we've done to get to this point has absolutely been beautiful. It's been painful at times, but it's been beautiful. And it's like, listen, when you're one step away, one game away from winning that ultimate game or getting to that ultimate game, yeah, it's something to behold. So that's why I'm saying we've trusted the process. We're about to reap the rewards. It's like a farmer that placed the seed out in the field and has been waiting all winter, has gone through the long dark times waiting for that crop to grow. And now we're in the springtime. Now the sun's shining through. Now the cold winter is gone. Now it's our time to reap the harvest. That's what I'm talking about in this episode, folks. So, having said that, I'm going to end the episode. Looking forward to the live stream game tomorrow. But with that, and until that time, I just want to say thank you all for watching in another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, I highly encourage you all to watch the next episode. I also encourage you all to do one of these 3 things. Like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. If by chance you subscribed in the past, you forgot to do so at the time, or you just subscribed and not had a chance to do so, again, please subscribe. It really helps me out, and I'm thankful for every subscription that I can get my hands on. But also, after you subscribe, make sure you turn on that bell notification icon as well, so that way you never miss any more content that I push out. Again, subscription numbers are always going up. We're almost to 5,000 subscribers. Hard to believe how quickly we've recovered ground, but let's keep that number going up so that way we can continue to recover. With that having been said, to also help in that endeavor, please share this content with your Lions friends and family members. Share here on YouTube, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, share it anywhere and everywhere you can with everybody and anybody that you can. And with that being said, I just want to again say thank you all for devoting some time to watching the content. I hope you enjoyed it. I also hope to gain your subscription if I had not done so before. And I want to welcome you all personally to the MCM family if you have done so. If you still have not decided to subscribe, hopefully you'll get a chance to come back again and do so. But until that time, I just want to say to everybody, God bless. I hope you all had a great day. I hope you all are having a great day. And until the next time we meet, which will be tomorrow, I'll see you all in the next episode.